and welcome back to A Moment in Time with Nex. If you were just with us, we just did another book review right before this one, and we're going to do a third after this. So stay tuned if you're interested. Hopefully you guys couldn't hear my stream echoing back, right? Hopefully not. If you could, it should be fixed now. So, hi. We are going to do book review number 2. This book is not really important or necessary to read, but I did read it, and I'll have a little story about it that you might find amusing, but I don't really suggest this book or spending much time on it at all. Spoiler alert. So the way that I found this book and the way that I actually received my physical copy of this Neville Goddard book, Feeling is the Secret, was on a date. So I was on a date with this guy. He was 15 years older than me, which is the oldest or the biggest age gap and oldest person that I've ever gone on a date with. But we had met organically and we had hung out just kind of at like a mutual place we like to hang out a few times. And I thought, well, he seems like a cool guy. I mean, it didn't feel like this huge age gap when we were just kind of hanging out casually. And I thought he could be interesting, and he was definitely interested in me. So I gave it a shot, and I feel fine about that. Ultimately, the relationship didn't work out. I think he's pretty convinced this has more to do with it than it did. It did, but this definitely didn't help. So on probably like our first official date, where it was just he and I and like planned to meet at a certain time, he brought this book with him. And he said, you know, I know you like to read, and this is my favorite book. This book changed my life. This is like the book that I live my life by, and every year I buy a few copies and I give them to different people that I meet and connect with, because I love sharing it, because it's such an amazing, great, profound book. It's really awesome and helpful. Now, if you know me, that was amazing. I was so excited. I thought that was so cool, and so like I was just like, I love books. I love to read. Most people that I go on dates with, I think, know this. And I've never had someone give me a book on a date. So I thought that was so different and unique and thoughtful and awesome. Just really something really great. And I was really excited about it. Plus, it's a super short, small book, so it's easy to read. And I thought, oh, I'm going to fly through this tonight, and then I can let him know what I think about it. And it will give me an insight into this person that I'm thinking about dating. Because the way he presented it was, it's his favorite book. It impacts like everything in his life and how he makes his choices and what he believes. So I figured, well, this is going to give me great insight into his value systems and his beliefs. So I was so excited. And I think I read about half of it that first night and had to stop. I was overwhelmed. It's so bad. It's really that bad. I mean, I don't usually I think, okay, books are kind of like, you know, like the last book we just reviewed on here. It's like, this book was like, whatever. But this book was bad. It was bad. The book is filled with contradictions. It'll say one thing, and then the next page or even the next like paragraph, it'll say something that is apparently quite contradictory to the first thing. And maybe they want to say it's all about paradox and two seemingly contradictory things coexisting. I mean, you can kind of throw semantics at anything to make it seem profound and enlightened and you know, divine in its nature, but I did not get any of that energy from this book at all. I got the vibe of a guy who likes to pretend like he's more spiritually in touch than others and has this kind of like condescending teacher tone. Like, let me tell you how it is because I am the enlightened being and I understand it. So let me explain it to you. And there's just really no true explanations. And he even says right in the beginning of the book, maybe I can just read it quickly. Blah, blah, blah. Were it possible to carry conviction to another by means of reasoned arguments and detailed instances, this book would be many times its size. It is seldom possible, however, to do so by means of written statements or arguments, since to the suspended judgment, it always seems plausible to say that the author was dishonest or deluded, and therefore his evidence was tainted. Consequently, I have purposely omitted all arguments and testimonials, and simply challenge the open-minded reader to practice the law of consciousness as revealed in this book. So he's going to say a bunch of stuff. He's going to reveal to you the law of consciousness, but he's not going to actually like try to convince you that it's legitimate, which he could have used. I could have used a little convincing, because I'm not convinced. Pretty much like every other sentence, okay, maybe not every other sentence, but like probably at least once per paragraph, which most of this is just kind of like big run-on sentences. Like there's no like indents or the whole thing reads like that. It's just like a big, huge block text throughout the whole thing. There's no formatting, which is fine. It's mostly just stream of consciousness type ideas anyway. But pretty much every paragraph will have at least one or two Bible verses. So he says he doesn't try to convince you or prove anything, but he certainly cites many Bible verses, which seems to be a way of proving he's like saying something, and then he goes, just like it says in the Bible, here. How can you refute that? How could you deny that I'm correct when there's a Bible verse that says what I'm saying? It would have been better to provide testimonials than it would be to provide Bible verses. 1000%. But okay, Neville, whatever you say, Mr. Goddard. Another one of my so not only did it trigger my own Christian, like post-Christian kind of recovery trauma, it was also a huge red flag for someone that I was dating, obviously. Like, me and this person do not have similar value systems. I like reason and logic and arguments and, like, the real world. And this guy is just like, nah, F that. Let's go with Bible verses. And I'm like, whoa, I'm super triggered by this. And this is the book that, like, he lives his life by. It's like the most enlightened book ever. And I asked him earlier, I was like, whoa, I think I flipped through it when he first like handed it to me. And I was like, oh, there's Bible verses. And he was like, oh yeah, I think he was like, oh, I forgot that it even had that. Like, it's not a big part of it. He just kind of like mentions them or something. But to me, it felt like it was the very core foundation that all of these arguments were built upon. They're not even arguments. They're just random statements that don't really say anything, and they contradict itself. It's like this whole, like, I can't say really like pseudo spirituality, but kind of. It's like this, it's like, oh, the consciousness is the feminine, the ego is the masculine. And you're like, dude, I hear that you're trying to sound profound and smart, but like, it just isn't that simple, and it doesn't really even make sense. Like, in what way? Okay, so that's what he says. So you're telling me that the subconscious, basically like a person asleep, is the feminine energy, and the waking person who is intentional in their actions and behaviors is the masculine energy. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to see why this could be a toxic belief system or a toxic idea. You're revealing this spiritual enlightenment to someone by saying that, like, female energy or feminine energy is asleep and unconscious and subtle, and the masculine male energy is like directed and organized and, you know, probably smart, and whatever else kind of weird toxic misogyny gets built into these beliefs, where the feminine is like the mysterious one, and the masculine is the obvious, clear, much more sensible one. It's just because you're a man. You know, women, we feel the same way about men. You guys are the mystery, and we are the ones that are obvious and make sense. It's just your personal, subjective experience. That's not the way that it is. Maybe many men feel like women are mysterious, and many women probably feel like men are mysterious. It's maybe just the way of the world. The reality is, any person that's not me is a mystery. This is not profound. This has nothing to do with gender or genitalia. And if you know me also, you know I have a little pet peeve around these stereotypes of masculine and feminine because they're tied to gender. Masculine means male. It means like a man. Feminine means like a female. So whether you say, well, everyone has masculine and feminine energies, you know that women are going to generally, if they're like cisgendered women who like identify women as women, and they have like XX chromosomes and are like the just like normative version of a woman, I think they would rather be labeled feminine than masculine because it's contrary and counter to their gender. Although women in the modern day are probably less affected by this than the inverse, which is a man being labeled as feminine. There's no way they're going to be like, yeah, that's, most men aren't like, oh, that's totally fine. Like, a lot of men are going to take offense to that. They're going to feel insulted. They're going to feel like you're telling them they're being like a woman, which is just very confusing. You don't have to hate the other gender to not want to be confused with them. You know, like if someone was like, I can't really tell if you're a man or a woman, I might feel a little strange about that. It's not, you know, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, but it does play some role in like our identity, and in terms of social norms, obviously how our society views these things makes a big difference too, where certain qualities are exalted. Like in a patriarchal society, those are going to be the stereotypically masculine traits, and then the female traits are going to be considered like weak and insignificant and inconsequential, basically. And it's the exact vibe that this guy gives. And a lot of these, like, what's the other guy? This is Neville Goddard. I'd never heard of him before, but I'm sure he would be buddies with what's his name? Aldous Huxley or something? Guys, who am I talking about? You know the guy I'm talking about? It's like, I read about him in that sex magic book. He was like a big... Aleister Crowley, that's his name. I don't know who the heck I was just talking about. Aleister Crowley. I feel like he's in the same boat with them, where it's like, I am going to seem pretentious and superior in my enlightened spiritual knowledge, and I'm going to insidiously perpetuate ideas that like men are superior to women. And maybe it's not even super conscious because they were likely raised in a patriarchy and taught these messages in the same ways, and they find that walking around as a basically like kind of cult leader vibe of like, I'm enlightened and people should listen to me and follow me and my spiritual insights that I reveal to them because I am the gatekeeper of the information, that's going to give them power and success potentially, which they then use to say the reason I have power and success is because I understand these spiritual concepts, which I didn't even really get into like what he really says in here because he mostly says nothing. Like the idea is like how you feel influences how you act, so you have to like make sure that you feel the way you want to feel before you act, and like the things that you say right before bed are really important because when you sleep, that's when you're like, your subconscious is working on the manifestation aspect of your whole waking life. I don't know, you know, there may be, someone said something the other day that was so accurate here. It was like, you know, 40% of what you're saying is true. And that's kind of the idea here. It's like people like this, like these cult leader type energies, they get by. You see this a lot in like online influencer culture too. It's like if they say like a couple true things or accurate things that resonate with people, it makes people think everything else they're saying is also legitimate and true and valid. So all they have to say is like really obvious, easy to understand, easy to agree with statements, and get you on board with them. Like, yeah, this person makes sense. This person gets me. We vibe. Like, yeah, he gets it. Yeah, I totally understand that. And then they're like, yeah, and all you have to realize is that, you know, these masculine, feminine dynamics, and do some affirmations, and you could be as cool as me. And you're like, well, I mean, maybe. There's definitely no downside into affirmations. There was something in this book that I thought was important. I think he said before you fall asleep, envision your like perfect life, you know. And I do like the idea of doing visualization exercises right before bed, because it does impact the way that you dream and whatever might be going on in your subconscious. So it's not like 100% of every single word he said was without value, but I wouldn't recommend this book to anyone. I'm probably going to throw this book away because I have no interest in anyone else ever reading it either. And that is extremely unusual for me, because normally I'll just donate the books to the library or to wherever, but this book's going in the trash. I just needed to do a review about it first to warn you. And start asking people you're going on dates with what their favorite book is and reading it before you waste too much time. Hi, Walter. How are you? First comment to the broadcast. Sorry, I wasn't really checking chat. I wonder if they use it as a Bible where they turn to a random sentence to help make a decision. Then you brought up the Bible. Oh my gosh, W, that's funny. I don't imagine any human actually tried to be mysterious. So what's the opposite? To strive for balance, right? Yeah, and it's not even really about balance. Like his whole thing here is like manifestation. It's like you can create the life that you want by like feeling it or believing it. It's just that the way he goes about trying to convince you is like through Bible verses that don't even make sense. And I mean, some of them are like, let me find an example. If you can give me just a moment, I'm sure I can find a good example here. Oh, it doesn't actually say the Bible verses, so you would actually have to go look them up. But here we go. Although the subconscious faithfully serves man, remember the subconscious is the feminine energy. It's the female archetype. It faithfully serves man. Although the subconscious faithfully serves man, it must not be inferred that the relation is that of a servant to a master, as was anciently conceived. The ancient prophets called it the slave and servant of man. Saint Paul personified it as a woman and said, "The woman should be subject to man in everything." And then he says Ephesians 5:24, also 1 Corinthians 14:34, Ephesians 5:22, which is 2 verses before the first one he said. He literally could have just put 22 through 24. Colossians 3:18, 1 Peter 3 verse 1. Is he really trying to claim that Paul, the person who used to murder Christians for funsies and then wrote most of the New Testament, and Christians just think, yeah, that holds up. That seems reasonable. That seems like the guy we should base most of our faith and religion on. Okay, Christians, whatever, you know, do your thing, I guess. Slay. He's trying to say that Paul was talking about the subconscious mind. He personified the subconscious mind when he said woman. He meant our own subconscious, not actually woman. Such bullshit. That is absolutely 110% bull. It is bull. 100%. That is not true at all. It works for his narrative of like, this is his thing about this whole subconscious, the importance of your subconscious mind. So he's like reworking everything in the Bible to verify what he thinks and believes and says, so that he can be like, look, I'm just saying the same thing they said in the Bible. But no, you're not. And the Bible is not the thing that you should want to be compared to. You don't want to be like, oh, me and the Bible are in cahoots. That's not good. That's not good. It's not a good thing. Okay. Like letting the Bible fall open at a random place and begin reading it. Yeah, that is definitely something that I used to do when I was a Christian, and I do something similar with tarot cards now. I really don't, actually, the next book we're going to review, we if I remember, we can talk about this idea, the value of randomness. All throughout human history, humans have used like random, like flipping a coin or like, you know, breaking the wishbone or whatever tradition it is to make a decision, right? Okay, well, who's gonna go first? All right, well, let's see who rolls highest on the dice. There's some kind of ritual where it's like, you're not superior to me because you rolled a 6 and I rolled a 1, right? You got luckier than me in that moment, and now you get to go first. It is literally random. It's RNG, random number generator. That's unless it's a weighted die, but generally it's random. And there is value in randomness, so there might be some value in opening your Bible and kind of like using that as inspiration. If you think the Bible is a good tool to do that with, which I do not. I would prefer tarot cards. Maybe you would prefer some kind of like self-help book. There's a book called like 101 Ways that are 101 Things That Will Change the Way You Think, or something like this, by Brianna Weist. I read this book last year, I think, or maybe the year before. That would be a good example because it's like 100 different things, basically. It's a couple pages maybe for each item. So like if you opened it up in there, you could be like, all right, or maybe like a book of gratitudes or affirmations, or you know what I mean? You can do this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I actually think that there's like value in having some type of ritual just to help you to steer your ship, you know? You're not a big fan of Neville Goddard. Okay. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Superfro. I like the idea of asking a date their favorite book. Yeah, me too. I remember my only speed dating experience. I was like, all right, what am I going to ask? Because you only have 2 or 3 minutes. And I was like, oh, I'm going to ask, what's your favorite book? And the first person I asked, he was like, Playboy, probably Playboy magazine. And I was like, all right, well, I want to just be a nun. Thank you. Goodbye. No hate towards Playboy, but it was a very tone-deaf joke. It was not, yeah, I could just tell this isn't the right guy for me, you know? Whatever. And it's one thing if he was like, no, just kidding, I really like this book. But no, the man didn't have enough brain cells to carry on any kind of conversation with me that I could latch onto. So that was the end of speed dating. All right, anyway, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna come back with our third book review, which will be on this book. This book review is probably gonna take a while. This book took me months to read, and it's super dense, full of information. There's a lot to say, and if you guys are gonna be here and chatting with me, I bet we'll have a lot of little side tangents we can go on. I did find this book really interesting, so I don't necessarily suggest that you read it because it is so like dense. It'll take a lot of effort, and I don't know, a lot of people don't have a lot of time, but I read it and I'll tell you what's in there so you don't have to spend months digging through it like I did. I love you. You are worthy of being loved and feeling comfortable in your own skin. Expreme medium, squeeze the day. This has been a moment in time with Nex. I will be right back with book review number 3, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. See you soon.